What if your whole life is never dazzling? A question that sounds simple, almost gentle at first, and yet the longer it lingers, the heavier it becomes. Because hidden inside it is not just a fear about success, but a fear about worth. A fear that if a life never becomes bright enough, impressive enough, extraordinary enough, it might somehow become smaller in meaning. Most people are taught to chase a life that shines, but strangely, some of the most meaningful lives never look dazzling from the outside. They do not roar, they do not dominate a room, they do not become legends, and yet they carry a quiet kind of fullness that many brilliant lives never reach. So before we ask how to become extraordinary, perhaps we should ask something deeper first. Why has being ordinary begun to feel so dangerously close to failure? There's a particular kind of fear that rarely arrives with drama. It does not need a collapse to make itself known. More often, it enters during very ordinary moments, while watching someone else move ahead, while scrolling past lives that seem brighter, faster, more certain, while realizing that your own days are still moving, but moving in a way that feels almost too plain to describe. And somewhere in that silence, a thought begins to form. What if this is it? What if my life never becomes anything remarkable? If in the end, there is no grand turning point, no dazzling version of me waiting just ahead, no moment large enough to make everything feel justified, then what does that make this life? Does it become lesser, easier to overlook, easier to dismiss? That is how a quiet pressure begins, a pressure many people carry without ever naming it. They keep going, they work, they stay responsible, they answer messages, meet deadlines, make plans, carry obligations, and continue to function. From the outside, nothing appears especially broken, but underneath, there's often a private restlessness that never entirely leaves, a feeling that by now they should be further ahead, more certain, more visible, more impressive. A feeling that life should already be offering clearer proof that all this effort is leading somewhere worthy. And so, little by little, people begin to look at their lives through borrowed light. Someone else seems more successful. Someone else appears more talented. Someone else moves with the kind of confidence that makes their path look almost cinematic. And then you turn back to your own life. The early alarm, the commute, the tired body, the unfinished thoughts, the repeated duties, the quiet hope that tomorrow might feel lighter. None of it looks like the kind of life people point to with admiration. None of it feels dramatic enough to silence the doubt, and that is where the unease deepens. Not because an ordinary life is ugly, not because it is wrong, but because so many of us were taught, directly or indirectly, that a valuable life must also be a visible one. It must have milestones that sound impressive when spoken aloud. It must leave a mark that other people can recognize. It must rise above the common line. From an early age, we are surrounded by stories that celebrate the exceptional, the one who stood out, the one who arrived first, the one who made everyone look, the one whose life can be translated neatly into achievement, applause, and proof. Far fewer stories teach us how to recognize the beauty of a quieter life. Far fewer voices tell us that living honestly, gently, and without betraying yourself may also be a profound success. That is why the fear of not being dazzling can become so exhausting. It turns life into a constant evaluation. Am I doing enough? Am I moving fast enough? Am I becoming someone worth noticing? Have I done anything that proves this life matters? And when a person lives under that invisible test for too long, they begin to lose the ability to simply exist without defending their worth. This is where so much hidden tiredness comes from. Not only from effort, but from the need to make effort look meaningful. Not only from responsibility, but from the pressure to turn responsibility into evidence that one is becoming somebody. A person may still be productive, still polite, still apparently functional, but inwardly, something begins to dry out because so much energy has been spent trying to become a more acceptable version of the self that very little remains for feeling fully alive inside one's actual life. What makes it worse is that comparison has no natural ending. There is no stable finish line. You reach something you once wanted, and the relief stays only briefly. Then a new standard appears. Someone else is doing more. Someone else is shining harder. Someone else seems to have turned life into a story worth telling. And suddenly the thing you once longed for begins to feel strangely ordinary in your own hands. The ladder keeps extending. The hunger keeps rearranging itself. The emptiness adapts. Over time, people can lose sight of what they genuinely wanted in the first place. Was this dream really mine, or did I inherit it from fear? Do I truly want a bigger life, or do I simply fear a life no one admires? Do I actually long for greatness, or do I just want reassurance that I am not forgettable? These are painful questions because they expose a difficult truth. Many people do not actually want to become the sun. They do not need the whole world to look at them. What they want, more quietly, is the feeling that their existence is not small, not wasted, not somehow less meaningful simply because it does not glitter. And that fear can make us careless with the very things that sustain a human life. We begin to overlook a peaceful morning because it is not impressive, a steady relationship because it is not dramatic, a decent day's work because it is not extraordinary, a body that still carries us through the day, a meal eaten without rushing, a conversation that feels sincere, a room that feels safe enough to return to. These things rarely arrive with spectacle, so they are easy to dismiss. Yet some of the deepest forms of nourishment have never depended on spectacle at all. Why does an ordinary life so easily get mistaken for an insignificant one? Perhaps because what is loud is easier to see. What dazzles is easier to praise. What dominates attention tends to be mistaken for what matters most. But attention and meaning are not the same thing. Visibility and depth are not the same thing. Some of the most sustaining qualities in a life are quiet by nature: loyalty, patience, decency, emotional honesty, the ability to remain soft without becoming fragile, the ability to continue caring after disappointment, the discipline of showing up for small responsibilities that will never be publicly celebrated. These things do not always sparkle, but they give life weight. They create interior richness. They keep a person from becoming hollow. Perhaps the suffering is not caused by an ordinary life itself. Perhaps the suffering comes from looking at that life through disappointed eyes, from treating it as a lesser draft of something more impressive that never arrived, from assuming that if a life does not astonish, it must somehow be lacking. That way of seeing slowly steals the ability to feel what is already present, and once that ability is weakened, even beautiful things begin to feel insufficient. A patch of morning light on the wall, someone who still sits beside you after difficult years, a day that was tiring but honest, a walk that slows your breathing, a mind that is not thriving perhaps, but has not entirely broken. These things may be too modest to impress anyone. But modest is not the same as meaningless. Much of life is not built from rare moments of triumph. It is built from repeated moments of presence, from the small acts of care that never become a story, from the quiet ways we keep choosing not to abandon ourselves. So perhaps the deeper shift is not about giving up on aspiration. It is about changing the question, not how do I make my life look more dazzling, but what makes my life feel more real? Not how do I become more admirable, but how do I become less estranged from myself? Not when will I finally be enough, but what kind of life allows me to breathe, to love, and to remain inwardly intact? Because maturity may not be about becoming the brightest version of yourself. It may be about recognizing which light is actually yours. Some lives rise like waterfalls, forceful and dramatic, crashing down from great heights, and some lives move like rivers through green fields, quiet and steady, nourishing everything along the way. The waterfall is easier to notice, but that does not make the river lesser. It simply speaks a different language of beauty. A small star does not need to compete with the sun in order to belong to the sky. It only needs to shine where it is. Quietly perhaps, modestly perhaps, but truly. And perhaps that is closer to what a fulfilled life really is. not a life that outshines everyone else, but a life one can inhabit without constant shame, without endless performance, without the aching sense of having failed simply for being human-sized. Maybe real radiance was never about being more dazzling than others. Maybe it is about being able to remain present inside your own life without feeling ashamed of its scale. Maybe it is found in waking up without immediately feeling behind, in loving without needing to make the love look impressive, in working without turning every effort into a referendum on your worth, in preserving the softness of the heart in a world that keeps rewarding speed, display, and comparison. If your life at this moment looks very ordinary, that does not mean it is empty. It may simply mean you are in a quieter season, a slower chapter, a stretch of road with less applause and more reality. And if the pressure of comparison has been draining you for longer than you can carry alone, reaching for trustworthy support or professional help that fits is not weakness. Sometimes it is one of the most honest ways to return to yourself. So what if your whole life is never dazzling? Then perhaps nothing is wrong. You may still live deeply without living loudly. You may still love fully without becoming legendary. You may still build a life of real substance, even if it never looks dramatic from the outside. You may still become a place of safety for someone else. You may still wake in the morning and find that the light passing through your window is enough to make the day feel possible. And perhaps, in the end, that is closer to wholeness than we have been taught to believe. Not a life that made the whole world look up, but a life that did not force you to keep looking away from yourself. Not a life crowned by spectacle, but one held together by sincerity. Not a life that burned the brightest, but one that remained warm, open, and quietly alive. And if one day you look back and realize your life was never especially grand, never especially famous, never the kind people would call extraordinary, that still does not mean it was without beauty. It may have been a life that loved well, a life that endured kindly, a life that stayed honest, a life that kept choosing what mattered, even when nobody applauded, a life that moved like a calm river, rather than a violent fall, and still carried its own grace all the way through. That, too, is a beautiful life.